Hello, it looks like I am live here. Welcome everybody. Good evening. I know this is not my usual day to go live, but the usual day to go live had some technical difficulties, so we're doing today instead. And I realize most of you will watch the replay because of that. Let me just turn off all my notifications here so they don't beep all the way through. There we go. Um, but glad to have you here. This is going to be a little bit of a continuation from last week. Last week we talked about the underlying causes that build up in your childhood that create that sense of not good enough, that sense of poor self-worth, that sense of poor self-love, and the four reasons why you develop those things that come out of your childhood experiences. So this week I want to talk a little bit about what you can do to turn that around. When you have dealt with some of those things and have begun to work on your self-worth, on your ability to love yourself, what are some of the things that you can do to really kind of keep that in the forefront of your thinking and of your behavior, of your emotional responses, so that you don't fall back into your old patterns? So we're going to look at some tips on how to change what we think about ourselves and undo some of that damage. Lori Deshane, in one of her tiny Buddha blogs, put it just perfectly and I read it the other day and I thought, oh, that's a very nice way to say that. And she says, we can't hate ourselves into a version of ourselves that we love. Think about that for a minute. We can't hate ourselves into a version of ourselves that we love. So if you want to become a version of yourself that you can love, you can't do it if you keep hating yourself. Now, I'm one of these people that is really good at being very hard on myself. I am my own worst critic, I know that. I have pretty high expectations of my own performance. I can be a little bit perfectionistic sometimes. I've been called demanding in the past. And I used to relentlessly compare myself to other people. It didn't matter how many times that I read or heard about how good I was or how lovable I was. It didn't matter how many awesome testimonials I had. It was never enough to counterbalance that I'm not good enough when I compared myself to others. It was really easy every day to find evidence that I was just a nobody, that I wasn't good enough, that I didn't deserve whatever it was that I was trying to do. Now, I know that as a child, I was told regularly that I was not living up to my full potential, and that if I would just try harder, and that belief was drilled into me like an unkillable virus for many years. And so it was always, well, you're not quite there. If you just work a little more, if you just do a little more, if you just, thank the universe for natural bioenergetics that gave me the tools to eliminate that virus. And I no longer believe that, and I no longer am driven by that. But the mental patterns and habits can be hard to break sometimes. And that's what we want to kind of look at today, is how to change our habits around those things once we've actually done the work to get rid of the patterns that were implanted or picked up or absorbed through our childhood and our upbringing. There's generally a lot of pressure in our culture to measure up, to be good enough, to be the leader, be the best, be number one, be at the top of the Google page. And we feel as like there's something wrong with us if we're not. For example, most women feel a significant pressure that if you're still single by a certain age, it's because, well, there's something wrong with you. Or if you don't make a certain amount of money, if you're not, if you're an entrepreneur and you're not having 6-figure months, well, there's something wrong with you. You need to work harder. You need to work smarter, but you also need to work harder. You don't really believe in yourself. There's something wrong with you. Or if you don't have a large enough social circle, if you don't have enough people in your Facebook group, or you don't have enough people in your club or your time, if we don't look or act a certain way. The list goes on and on and on ways that we can compare ourselves to others, and of course then make ourselves feel less than, make ourselves feel worse than. And sometimes in the middle of all that pressure, it's really easy to forget about all the wonderful and unique things about ourselves. I used to get stuck in my head a lot. I still can. I'm much better than I used to be. I've dealt with a lot of it. But I can still allow that inner critic, that voice in my head, the voice of my childhood. And I'm probably the most critical person I know, maybe next to the childhood critic who installed a lot of those patterns into me. But I can allow that inner critic to completely tear apart my self-esteem very rapidly. And then I'll give up, or I'll do nothing, or even worse, I'll sabotage myself. So the other day, while I was busy beating myself up over something that I had forgotten to do, I don't actually even recall at the moment exactly what it was, but I know I'd forgotten something. And while I was busy telling myself how inappropriate and useless that was and how I'd screwed myself up and etc., I got a text from a client telling me how wonderful I was and how much she appreciated my work and how life-changing it was for her. Literally, while I was doing this, I got this text. Well, that text now sits on my screen as a screenshot to remind myself that going down the road of comparing myself to somebody else and how they're so much better at it is really useless. And I really don't need to do it. And it's a mental habit I need to stop. And it's one we all need to stop. But we can't stop it unless we've done the energy to take the emotional charge out of it. If we've done the energy balancing and the energy work to take the charge out of it so we no longer believe that. So it's no longer really there. It's just that we have this habit that, that deeply entrenched neural pathway that we get on and it just kind of takes us like a rut. That we have to change. And we change that by reminding ourselves, comparing ourselves to others is just really not helpful. And actually, I get comments like that on a pretty regular basis. And they always open my eyes to just how much I matter, regardless of how much my inner critic provides me with lots of objections. And learning to silence that inner critic and say, hey, I don't need to compare myself to somebody else. Yes, I know that coach or that teacher or that natural bioenergetic specialist is that much better and they don't do that. But you know what? I don't care because I'm doing what I know how to do, the way I know how to do it, and people are benefiting from it. It's changing lives, it's helping people, and that's what I'm here for. If they do it better, well, all the more power to them. Love it. Great to have colleagues like that. But we just really need to stop that comparing ourselves to somebody else. We need to stop listening to that inner critic. Here's an eye-opening experience for you. I want you to go do this. I want you to write down and make a list of the things that you are tempted to beat yourself up about. So as soon as that thought comes in and it's like, oh, I shouldn't have eaten that because now I'm not going to fit my bathing suit, or, oh, how could I possibly have missed that email, or, if I would just be more organized, or, if all those things that we like to beat ourselves up about, make a list of them. All the things that don't really matter. Like whether or not we look like a Victoria's Secret model, whether or not we should stop smiling because we haven't whitened our teeth this week, or, the stupid things that we tend to beat ourselves up about, but also the more serious things. But make a list of every one of those things. And then sit down and look at them and see how many of them are because that is a comparison between you and somebody else. And if it is, then you need to either, one, do some work to make that comparison irrelevant, or two, you need to break the habit of comparing yourself to that person. Both of those are things that we can do with energy medicine. So I've done a lot of work to release and reframe all those old beliefs, all those tapes in my head, but I still occasionally catch myself when I'm in a non-serving, usually overtired, usually overly busy situation, and one of those thoughts will come in. And I may slip and let those thoughts come in, but then I catch myself and I go and I do the energy work necessary to change the charge, to take the power off of it, to make that thought just a thought, and not have a story and not have an emotion. It's just a thought that I can go, oh, I don't need that, thank you. And over time, there are less and less of them. And I've learned that having the thought is not the problem. Believing the thought and holding on to it is the problem. Allowing the autoplay victim story that comes with it, that's the problem. The fact that a thought runs through your head is not the problem. You can have the power and the tools to turn it off and kick it out. Well, my self-love journey is an ongoing journey. I'm very human, believe me. I want to share some of the things that I have sort of developed in my daily routine to help me break some of those habits of where my brain goes automatically when I'm not thinking about it. Because when I think about it, I realize those comparisons are useless. But it's the automatic things that happen when you're busy thinking about something else that you just go down the road. So, first thing, people that I compare myself to also are comparing themselves to someone else who is comparing themselves to someone else. And we compare ourselves to people who seem to have it all, who seem to be that perfect what we would like to be. But you know as well as I do that they don't, that they have their flaws, they have their moments. They're not that perfect shell that shows up on the outside. They're not really any better than I am or than you are. We just can't see their faults. And so when we look at people through a lens of compassion and understanding, rather than judging ourselves and being jealous about it, we're better able to see them for who they are, just human beings, and we're better to see ourselves as we are, just human beings. They are a beautifully imperfect human being going through the same universal challenges that we all go through. And if I'm going to compare myself to that person, that's what I need to compare myself to. I'm a human going through trials just like they are a human going through trials, and we all have our own responses to it. And what shows on the outside isn't what I should be comparing myself to. I don't want to compare myself to anyone. I want to see that other person with compassion and with understanding and recognize that they too are on a journey. They might be a few steps ahead of me, and that's great, and I can use that as a role model, but they're really no different. And that comparison is really the only valid comparison there is that we're all human and we all make mistakes and we all have things we wish we'd do differently. So when you're comparing yourself, that's the only fair comparison. Second thing that I've had to learn is that my mind is a very convincing liar, and believe me, yours is too. Your mind is a very convincing liar. I had a quote on the front of a journal, which is quite a number of years ago now, and I don't think I even have the journal anymore, but that quote will never leave my head. And it's in big red letters, don't believe everything you think. Don't believe everything you think. I don't know where it came from, but that quote completely altered the way I react when a nasty or a discouraging thought floats through my mind. The thought is just a thought. They pass through, and it doesn't mean I need to invite it in and give it a welcome and tell it to stay. It's unhealthy and exhausting to give that much power to a negative thought. The positive thoughts flip by and we don't invite them in and give them a home and tell them to stay very often. Once in a while we do, which we probably should do more often, but we often don't. So why do we do that to the negative ones? So I have learned, I have created a habit, I've created a practiced response, and that is to remind myself that the thought is a lie and I don't need to accept it. Now when you get to the point where you can recognize it for what it is, name it for what it is, and let it go, then those negative thoughts flip in and you just kind of flip them out. You may have to learn how to take the emotional charge out of it and change the story that comes with it on autoplay. But we have the energy medicine tools, we have the balances, all the things that we teach in our coaching program for you to be able to kick those thoughts out quickly. And when one does stray in, you have the tools to capture it and kick it out without any damage. But remember, don't believe everything you think. The fact that a thought wanders through your mind does not mean it's yours or that it needs to stay there. Just like it wandered in, you can wander it out. Just like a bird that flies in your window, you don't invite it to make a nest inside. You shoo it back out the window where it belongs. 3, you need love the most when you feel like you deserve it the least. You need love the most when you feel like you deserve it the least. Now, I'm sure that has been said many times before. And you deserve love and compassion because you are human, not because you feel like you deserve it. Feeling like you deserve something is rather irrelevant. Deserving has nothing to do with your feelings. You deserve it because of who you are, not what you feel. And I find that it's the most difficult to accept that loving understanding from others when I'm in a state of anger or shame or anxiety or depression. And yes, we all have those moments. But adopting the you need the love the most when you feel it the least can help you shift your perspective. And it made me realize that love is actually the greatest gift that I can receive during those times. I don't deserve love because of how I feel, because I'm probably not acting and being very loving and kind, and probably actually being quite prickly and nasty and a little agitated. But that's when I need to receive the love the most. As I receive that gift of love, it allows me to deal with the state of shame or anger or anxiety or depression, and that changes how I relate to the feelings as well. Feelings are not the reality. The reality is you deserve love from others. You deserve love towards yourself. You deserve to love yourself because of who you are, not because of how you feel. And once you have that love as the basis, it allows you to deal with how you feel. And we tend to get that backwards. So flip that around and it'll make life a lot easier. The 4th thing that really helps me is to fully accept and make peace with the present, with the now. Because you kind of have to do that before you can move forward and feel satisfied with where you're going. One of the things I've learned about making change and reaching for the next rung of the ladder is that unless you feel satisfied with where you are, it's really hard to reach out and get going to the next one. Until you can figure out how to accept and acknowledge and even appreciate where you are, and it may not be a very good place, it may be a rough place, it may be a difficult place, it may be an unhappy place, but until you can get present and acknowledge and accept that this is where you are and this is the way it is, then you're going to have a really hard time going to the next step. It is what it is. It's okay. You are where you are, but you don't need to stay there. You need to embrace and make peace with where you are, where your journey is, what's happening in your life right now, in order to move to something new that will be more peaceful, more rewarding, more satisfying. Think of it this way. If you're on a diving board and the diving board doesn't give you a firm, flexible footing, instead of a beautiful, graceful dive when you jump, you're going to end up doing a belly flop. You have to have that firm footing to push off of to make the leap into what you want. And making peace with the present is how you do that. And we have lots of energy tools to help you with that. We have lots of coaching processes to help you with that. And we're not saying you have to like it where you are, but you have to be able to be present in it. You have to be able to accept it, and you have to be able to not let the story of it drive you into self-hatred or into self-sabotage or into all of the kinds of things where you don't have a firm foundation to move forward. The 5th thing I wanted to share with you tonight in relationship to this is you need to focus on the progress rather than the perfection. It's on how far you have come rather than how far you have left to go. When I look at myself and I go, this is who I want to be, this is where I want to be, that's quite a ways out there, and there's still a lot of things I need to work on. I'm far from perfect. But if I look back at how far I've come from, I can go, hey, I've made some really good progress. I'm okay. I'm on the right road. Next step, please. As opposed to, oh, that's a long, long ways away. I don't know if I can get there. One of the biggest causes of self-hatred or self-loathing is that destructive belief in that internal need to get it right. As we strive for perfection and success, and we fall short, we all do, we are all less than, we are all less worthy than we would like to be. None of us are perfect. We all have areas of our lives in which we wish it was different. What we don't seem to recognize is that working towards our goals and being willing to put ourselves out there to try new ways to grow and to work on ourselves is actually an accomplishment in itself. Regardless of how many times we fail or misstep or don't get it right, the act of trying itself is in itself progress. The fact that you're wanting to and able to do something to try to move forward is in itself progress. Because when you are actually stuck, you won't be doing that. You'll just be sitting there in self-pity and wallowing in all the things going on in your life. The fact that you're able to even try says you're making progress. It might be slight, it might be small, but it's making progress. And if we focus on the progress instead of the end point, we'll be a lot happier and we'll actually do a lot better. So instead of berating yourself for messing up and stumbling backwards, give yourself a pat on the back for trying. Then do some more work on yourself with the energy medicine tools, with the coaching, and try again. Every step is progress, and it won't be too long until you're looking back to where you are now and going, hey, I've moved forward. I've made progress. I'm on the right step. I'm getting there. And you'll look and see how far you've actually come. However, on the other hand, just doing the same thing over and over and over doesn't count. You have to do the work in between the tries. You have to use the tools and the techniques. You actually have to change something before you try again. Because just repeating the same step over and over isn't going to get you anywhere. So yes, it is a matter of just get up there and do it, but it's also educate yourself and learn and do something different each time. If you don't try something different, you will eventually give up. And it's as you work on different steps that you will make progress. You have to actually do the work. And all of those things we teach you in Reclaim Your Life. Whether you make 2 tries or 200 tries to get better, keep working on it. It's the progress, not the end point. And lastly, as I started at the beginning, you can't hate yourself. You can't hate your way into loving yourself. Can't hate yourself. Can't hate your way into loving yourself. Telling yourself that you're a failure will not make you any more successful. Telling yourself that you haven't lived up to your full potential, that you can't reach your full potential, telling yourself that you're worthless, that you're unlovable, won't make you any more lovable, won't make you any more worthy, won't make you feel any better. I know it sounds annoyingly simple, but the only way to achieve self-love is to actually love yourself. And you do that by managing your self-talk, by not telling yourself those things, by telling yourself that you are worthy, by looking at why you're worthy, by stopping the comparisons, by doing all these things, by doing the energy work to change the charge on things. Regardless of who you are and where you stand, even if you know you want to change, you actually have to do it. You are enough just as you are. And self-love will make it a little bit easier every time you remind yourself of that. So you have to actually, it's one of these where if you tell yourself often enough, you're going to learn to believe it. Well, that's works for yourself. If you tell yourself you're terrible and you're unworthy and you're unlovable and you always make a mess and you screw up, and that's your constant talk to yourself, that's what you'll believe. That's where you'll become. That's what you'll start to do. But if you tell yourself, I am worthy. I'm a human being. I'm trying. I'm making progress by baby steps. I'm doing the things I need to do. I'm working my plan. I love myself. I am worthy. Over time, telling yourself those things, you will begin to believe them. Your beliefs will turn into your words will turn into your actions, and you'll make significant progress. So as you're applying these 6 tips regularly, self-love and self-worth will begin to grow and glow and flourish in your life. I'm going to run over the 6 of them again for you quickly because I know I went through this really fast. Remember that the people you compare yourself to are also comparing themselves to somebody else, and they're really no different than you are. They're still human, and viewing them and yourself with love and compassion and stopping the judgment between them will make life a whole lot simpler. 2, your mind is a very convincing liar. It will tell you all kinds of things, but just because it tells them to you doesn't mean you need to let them stay in your brain. Kick them out. You need love the most when you feel like you deserve it the least. Don't let your feelings get in the way of receiving the gift of love. You have to fully accept and make peace with the present before you can move forward and feel satisfied with where you're going. You need a foundation to jump from. Focus on the progress rather than the end point. And stop talking to yourself with hate. Stop treating yourself with hate. You can't hate your way into loving yourself. So as you do these 6 things, you will begin to shift the way your self-love and your self-worth shows up in your life. Hope this has been helpful to you. Please join us weekly. Watch the replays in the group. In our Reclaim Your Life coaching group, you can go into the guides and watch the Thriving in Chaos if you haven't done that. Just take 1 step. Drop a comment below and tell me which tip you're going to focus on this week. I'll try and put all of the 6 points in the messages, probably in the comments underneath, so that you can review them when you want to. But start building these 6 tips into your life, and you'll start to see your self-love and your self-worth grow. Thanks for joining me, and we'll talk to you next week.